Welcome to Policy Committee. 27th of November. We've done the housekeeping here, so there are no apologies except for Councillor Hammond. And I move that Councillor Hammond be accepted and leave of absence be granted. Call for a seconder, which is Councillor Wheeler. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Any members wishing to declare a conflict of interest with any of the items on today's agenda, please notify governance if you do. So our member of the public has not arrived, so let's come back. Okay, so we will come back if the person arrives. Okay, so let's move on to our first item, the partial revocation of recreation reserve adjacent to 63 Black Beech Street. Have we anything to be added?
So through the chair, I'm Anna, General Counsel. My legal colleague Siobhan prepared this report. She was unable to be here today. I reviewed it, so I'm here to speak to it. I'm wondering if I should go through it or just take questions.
I think just any updates, and then we'll go for questions.
Yes, no updates on the report. It's all
Okay.
as per.
So questions, folks? Councillor Swales?
On page 5, paragraph 7, which is when we, the public excluded on the 4th of February 2010. With regard to that, we've gone through a process, and it said that the land would be sold, and an agreement of sale and purchase to sell using standard terms and conditions was signed on the 28th of June 2012. So did we agree a price then, or are we still open to a market price now?
No, so we agreed back in 2012.
Yeah.
A market price at that time.
Right.
That market value was provided by an independent valuer, and it was for the sum of 13,000, subject to the purchaser paying all the costs involved.
Yeah.
The agreement went into abeyance, and it wasn't until 2023 that the purchaser's legal representative got in touch. And at that stage, people had forgotten that there was an agreement in place. And so the purchaser was asked to submit a new valuation as of 2023. The purchaser's valuation came in at 7,000, and on the basis that council pay all the costs. However, looking at the file, the purchaser eventually agreed that the existing 2012 agreement was still in force, and agreed to pay the 13,000 under that agreement, including all the costs.
Thank you for that summary. It just gave me a little bit of clarity, so thank you. Any question?
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Ultra.
Thank you. So through you, Chair, page 5.5, that points out that the Mr. Glover's surveyor and the council were the ones that made the mistake in the first place in terms of the setback. So I think, it seems to be a no-brainer to me to correct what was a historic mistake.
Yes, and through the chair, from probably more a personal perspective, I think there were clearly mistakes on both sides, starting with the surveyor. But Mr. Glover's mistakes, you know, were done with the best of intentions. You know, they weren't deliberate, and obviously neither were council's. And I say that because I did note in the submissions, you know, one of the submitters said we shouldn't be rewarding the purchaser for, you know, building their additions onto reserved land. We should be punishing them, but I don't think there's a call for that here.
Yes, councillor Bentley.
Thank you. Just on 23, the responses to issues raised in the submissions, explain to the public why it's taken 10 years to resolve the issue. Our response says that the process to revoke the reserve status before the sale required the purchaser to instruct the surveyor to prepare the necessary plans. It appears to not happen quickly, and changes of staff at council led to not being followed up or addressed till 2023. I accept a couple years delay, but 10 years?
Yeah.
What, have we tidied up that process so it doesn't happen again?
I can't speak to that. An operational person would need to, but I had thought there was an attachment whereby we did say that from the operations people that that would be tidied up. From memory, you might be able to help me out. But in terms of an encroachment.
We are working towards developing an encroachment policy that would identify these things quicker in the future and potentially have a way to deal with them that doesn't necessarily require the sale of land. It might be a license to occupy or some other option are available for those sort of situations in the future. But the delay, it's a little bit lost in the week there. Not quite sure how it got dropped quite so badly, and it's not likely to happen in a sort of more electronic way.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and through the chair, it was dropped by both sides. In a normal circumstance, you would at least get one of the parties saying, hey, what's going on?
I don't blame him for not wanting to give us money sooner, so I can't hold it against him. He's only rational, but yeah, we should have wanted our money. Cool. Thank you.
So councillor Bentley, do you want to move the recommendations? Oh, sorry, councillor Wheeler.
Okay, just how long does it take, if it all went according to plan, how long does it take for the revocation to go through the process? Is it weeks, months, or?
The next step is for us to initiate the revocation, and that's by application to the minister. In the normal run of things, that should be done within weeks. However, just because of all the changes going on in the public sector, I imagine they will be prioritising. And when we sought the minister's consent, we would be making a case to prioritise this one. But we are obviously very keen to get the money for council. Yeah.
Yes, councillor Griffiths.
Thank you for all the updates and everything. I think we'll move to the report.
Oh, you'll move it. Okay, great. And seconded by councillor Bentley. So if there's any further discussion, we'll move. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, so dangerous, affected and insanitary buildings policy adoption report. Have the officers anything to report on this?
Just through you, Chair, I might, by way of remind the committee that was at the 4th of September Policy Committee meeting where Council approved by a forthwith decision to consult on the proposed policy. Officers then went and consulted as requested. Through the period, we received 5 submissions on the policy. 3 of these submissions stated that council should adopt the policy as proposed. There were a further 2 submissions that consider that council should adopt it with amendments. Of those 2 submissions, officers suggest that one of the submissions, the concerns raised by the submitter are actually covered, so we wouldn't suggest any amendments there. In terms of the other submission, we do agree that a minor amendment is appropriate around referencing the Housing Improvement Regulations 1947. And then following on from that, as per the paper, officers recommend option 3, which is adoption of the proposed 2024 Insanitary Buildings Policy. We do have Suzanne Rushmere sitting here. Also, if there are any specific technical questions, thank you, Suze.
Anything to add yourself, Suzanne?
I have nothing to
Ready
add.
for questions? Any questions? Right. Oh, no?
Happy to see you. Oh.
I thought you.
Option 3,
Three.
yep, option 3 is the recommendation. So was it moved by councillor Griffiths, seconded by councillor Bentley? Wow, all those in favour say aye. Against? Option 3 is carried. Thank you, Suzanne.
Changes in the main street.
So our next item is engagement strategy and planning report. Who is going to lead
I'll
that?
lead that. Through you, Chair.
Mm.
So I'm anticipating there might be a few more questions on this paper than there were in the last paper. Just by way of introduction, rather update, just to note in terms of paragraph 7 regarding plan change 49, on Wednesday the 20th of November, we were made aware that an appeal has been made by the Guildford Timber Company relating to that. Also to note, by way of update in terms of plan change 50, that we have released the 242 further submissions regarding that as well. I think it might be worthwhile actually to pass over to my colleagues Suzanne and or Emily to potentially provide a bit more of an update, because I know there is a lot of interest around plan change 49 and 50. And also over the page in terms of paragraphs 9 through 11 around the regional policy statement for the regional plan change 1. But
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, through the chair. So in terms of plan change 49's appeal, the appeal is seeking to go back as much as possible to notified provisions, which the difference between the notified provisions and the decision provisions is that the notified provisions provide for a potential road and infrastructure corridor to go up the spur towards the Guildford Timber Company's intended development area. And the decision provisions do not particularly enable that road. So that's the content of the appeal. So the appeal, while it's an appeal on the entire plan change, is really limited to that Silverstream spur area. So that means that the rest of the open space provisions under PC 49 become effectively operative, although we can't make parts of the plan change operative. All of the other changes that were made through that plan change, because they're not challenged by that appeal, are able to have legal weight now and come into legal effect.
So just to clarify, what position are we taking then on the appeal, if anything?
At this time, we are waiting to see who else may join the appeal by way of 274 parties. So any submitter or any other person with an interest greater than the public in general able to join the appeal as a section 274 party. And they have 15 working days from the time the appeal was served on them, on the people who made submissions, to do so. So we're waiting to see who joins the appeal. We anticipate that there will be significant interest from many of the submitters on that plan change, particularly on the variation
to joining that appeal, so we just need to wait and see. The main point for council is that it is council's decision and it is council's role in the process to defend that decision, but to still remain open-minded to any potential changes that may come from the other parties in the process. We anticipate that this will go towards the Environment Court once the parties are established, will go towards mediation, and we will see at that time whether there is any movement from any of the parties involved. Once it goes into those processes, we really aren't able to comment as officers in the public at all. It becomes a process that's sort of a judicial process, and we need to respect that process as we work through it. And so we're not really able to provide you with any updates on that until it comes out of the process, either as a consent order from the mediation or an Environment Court decision. The only thing we can update you on is that we are either in the stage of mediation or we are going to court, those kind of factual components, but not the content of the discussions in the meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got Councillor Bentley followed by Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the officer. Do we understand yet how this is going to interact with the fast track legislation?
Through the Chair, that's a very good question. Not really at this stage, so it is all a matter of timing. So we understand that the fast track legislation will be enacted through next year. It was to be prior to Christmas, it is no longer the case. So that will be happening early next year, and then it will depend on when the Guildford Timber Company puts in an application and when it is processed under that government-led process by, considered by the independent panel. So that side of the process is very much out of our hands in terms of timing and results. So no, the short answer is we really can't know. The only thing we do know is that if an appeal is heard and the Environment Court makes the decision prior to that application being considered by that panel, then the decision of the Environment Court will have an impact on the panel's decision. But the timing of both of those processes is very uncertain.
Councillor Carey.
That may join under that 374. 274. Is that for or against in that appeal, or what does that look like?
Absolutely, they can have any position they choose. They just need to have an interest greater than the public in general. So if they were a submitter on the plan change, they would generally have an interest greater than the public in general. But other parties, so there may be people who didn't get involved in the plan change, but now wish to come in and become involved.
So
Carry on. Yeah.
So who assesses the weight of whether it's greater than public interest other than the submitters?
Generally, the submitters make a statement to that effect, or the person making a 274 application makes the assessment themselves, and it would only be challenged if it got or potentially could be challenged by any of the parties in mediation. So it could be that the appellant says, I don't think you have that interest, and there's a debate and discussion within the mediation. They basically ruling on whether that person has status.
Councillor Altrip.
Thank you, through you, Chair. We already adopted the plan change 49 variation 1 in the Commissioner's report, which excluded a road on the spur, and I just wonder how this fits with certainly the fast track in terms of the letter of support that we all agreed to. Do we need to withdraw the letter?
No, through the Chair, no, this is two separate processes.
It is two separate processes, but we've already agreed in one aspect. So what I mean is that we already adopted the Commissioner's report, which goes against what's coming in the fast track. Are we still able to withdraw that letter of support?
That's not, through the Chair, that's not something I'm able to comment on. That is not an RMA matter, that letter of support. It's a completely separate matter, so I can't comment on the letter of support. What I can say is that the two processes are very separate. So the plan change appeal is around a road up the spur, if you like. the fast track potential application that Guildford Timber Company may make will be a much wider application covering a much more substantial area of land.
And including a road?
May include a road.
May.
May. We don't know yet. We are not preparing that application. Guildford Timber Company is preparing that application.
So,
And in terms of, just one more thing, in terms of the decision made on Plan Change 49, that decision has now been appealed by Guildford Timber Company. So that is what they're actually putting an appeal against. So full adoption of, if you like, the plan change is when it's become operative after all appeals have been resolved. So it's still an open matter in terms of the RMA. So it's not final at this stage.
Yes, councillor Altree, you following up?
thank you, Chair. So the in principle in our letter of support, is this effectively one of those details that we need to look out for in terms of the in principle definition? It's something that these are the moving parts that we didn't know when we said in principle.
Yes, I defer to. That's not a question I can answer.
We had a definition of what in principle means, but basically it is not relevant to what the situation is right now. A decision was made and an appeal has been lodged by another organisation. Yeah?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. That's why.
Yes, councillor Swales.
Thank you. So I have two questions. So when does the 15 days end?
Should be the 9th of December.
So whilst people can join by a 274 application, do they have to keep it to what Guildford have done with regard to the reference of possibly rescinding the decision about access to a road there, or are they able to open it up to other issues that they had around the spur? Or is it limited to what Guildford have put in?
That it has to be related
To the spur?
Yep.
No.
Through the chair, it has to be related to Guildford's appeal. They have to be responding to Guildford's appeal. So I think that Guildford's appeal is slightly wider than the road exactly. They're seeking to go back to the notified provisions with some amendments from their original submission. So it's a little bit wider but it's definitely limited to the spur in its entirety, and the main point is around the road.
So
It still has to be related.
I have two subsequent questions, if that's all right, yeah.
Yeah.
So Emily, is there any way that we can see so that we as elected people have an understanding and appreciation of what it is that Guildford are challenging with regard to the decision that this council took? Would be really helpful, I think, because obviously, you know, there's conversations out there happening around that. The other thing is with regard to having access to that, is there any indication of a timeline when the Environmental Court will actually look to give us a date, or is that something that we have no control over? And then my third is, will we be going back to the commissioners, or will we as officers defend our position?
Through the chair, I think that ended up being 3 questions.
Yeah, it was, and I do apologise.
Answer the last one first.
Yeah.
It is the council's decision.
Okay.
So it is, we do not go back to the commissioners.
That's
It
good.
is the council's decision. It is council delegations through the chief executive that will actually be resolving the issues before it comes back for its final. Let's assume there's an environmental decision or a consent order finalising the matter. It will come back to council to make it operative, to set an operative date and make it operative. So it will come back to the council table sometime in the future when it has got through all of this. Second point around the dates. No, we don't really have a lot of control over the dates. The Environment Court may consider, because this is a relatively confined matter, that they might be able to deal with it quickly relative to some other bigger matters such as the RPS appeals, which are much more substantial scale. But the Environment Court is always overloaded, and we don't have any indication at this stage of dates. We anticipate that it absolutely won't be until sometime early next year that we really hear back from the Environment Court, given that there's an RMA close down from the 20th of December to the 10th of January. So there's a bit of a time lag there. In terms of our response to the appeal, we have to file something by the 16th of January around that. Just to say that we are position, simply. It's not a big defence, it's just we are sticking with the council's decision at this time, and we will be going forward into the process with that basis.
Thank you, and it's good to know that actually we're not incurring any more costs through the commissioners.
Suzanne?
Through you, Chair, I've also just sent links to the appeals for the regional policy statement and to our own appeal through to group manager, so those will be disseminated to all councils.
And the chair, the appeal is actually already on our website, part of the status of that plan change. The notice of appeal from the Timber Company is on our website for all to see.
So we're talking, sorry, so we're talking about the regional council plan change one now, right? No, or are we still on?
Linked to both.
Okay.
So both ours and the regional, sorry, through regional policy.
And just Emily, the process with the appeal is that if any of us express a particular opinion, we will exclude ourselves from any decision-making around it.
Richard, yes, that is correct. That's the usual process of being very careful when you're dealing with these kind of matters, that you do have a decision to make in the future about that plan change as it comes back to the table to make it operative. So yes, if you express strong opinions prior to that, you wouldn't be making that decision with an open mind.
Thank you. Councillor Swales, another one. Oh, is that
Can we
another
move
item?
on to another topic if everyone's
I think so.
Okay, putting on.
Yep.
I can, okay. So I'm now on the Wellington Regional Statement Plan Change 1. With regard to that, we're aware of our application and our submission to that. I'm assuming that we've already lodged our appeal. Is there any way that we can see what it is that we've counted to them and what we're having that discussion with? Because that would be really good as elected members to have an oversight of what it is, whether we're appealing or challenging everything in our submission or we have picked or taken the eyes out of it.
Through you, Chair, yes, so that the link has been sent to our notice of appeal that was lodged. We haven't appealed on all of the points that we made in our submission. We've actually reduced that down quite a bit. Partly that's because a lot of the provisions in the regional policy statement were freshwater provisions, and we can't appeal those to the Environment Court. We can only appeal them against judicial review, and I think we brought that to the table a few weeks ago. So that's automatically sort of constrained the matters that we lodged an appeal for. And there's sort of some other provisions that we sort of thought actually, some of them around coastal, obviously we don't want to appeal on those because we don't have a coast. So there's other provisions that we have appealed. All the other TAs this side of the hill have also lodged appeals. So Wellington, Hutt, Porirua and Kapiti. The links that I've sent through will have links to those notices of appeals as well. Now what we're doing is having a look at the appeals from those other authorities, determining whether or not we want to be a 2-7 party to those appeals. And there are some provisions that we haven't lodged an appeal on in our own right, so that we would like to be a 2-7-4 party to those, and we're going through that process at the moment, similar to the date for our own appeal for PC49. We have to get 2-7-4 lodged by the 9th of December. And then obviously we'll wait to hear when mediation starts.
So will we be able to have a verbal update then at our meeting on the 11th of December as to whether we've decided to do a 274 to the others. You know, not appreciating that there'll be a paper, but a verbal update would be kind of good to know before Christmas.
Yeah, we are looking at that. We have seen, because it's quite a few provisions that we would like to appeal on. And we're going through that process, but absolutely we can bring that back. Yes, it will be public. We can provide links as well.
Any other questions? Any other items you wanted to talk about, councillor Swales?
Yeah, actually, you're right.
Sorry.
Wellington Regional Growth Framework Project. So under so looking at regional deals, I know the Wellington Regional Growth Strategy are looking at projects that they're going to put up for regional deals. So when do they think that they might land that, and when would they come back to the TAs, the individual TAs, as to what they might look like?
Sorry.
There's going to be a meeting in early January.
Okay. And then something will come
But I'm
back.
not overly hopeful.
Oh, okay.
You could tell exactly what's going to happen yesterday at the meeting yesterday. Everyone's sort of got a real big regional picture, but we want something to happen in my place.
Suzanne, you were going to say something to that?
Through you, Chair, I was just about to say I don't know the answer and I was going to defer. So.
No, there's a couple, sorry. 45, page 45, and it's the phase 2 fast track approvals bill. So because Schedule A has been approved, and then you've got the 2B projects that they've decided that they're not going to look at anything there. Those projects that were put to the panel by the 3 ministers, right, to have a look at, you said something really interesting when one of my colleagues talked about the fast track bill. So is it right that whilst Guildford has been put up as a proposed project to go forward for fast track, that doesn't mean then that it still needs to go through a review process, and then we get the opportunity to have 10. Walk me through where is Guildford actually at in this fast track process?
So through the chair, the fast track process is with the government. So it's a panel of, so they need to make an application once there is legislation to make an application.
Okay, right.
The legislation is not yet enacted. It will be enacted early next year.
Yeah.
We understand. But we're waiting for that. Once it's there, they will need to make an application against that. There are 149 projects on that list.
Yeah.
So the principle of both first in, first serve applies. So if they lodge their application and it's number 145, there may be quite a substantial time before they're able to process those 145 and get onto that application. Whereas if they are in, I don't know, the first 10, they may begin immediate processing. So there is a timing issue there that is completely out of anybody except Guildford Timber and the other applicants' hands. And it will depend, of course, on the timing of that bill arriving and how ready those projects are to pop an application in instantly to do that. The second element of that is that the entire process from that point to an approval of or not of that and whatever conditions are applied to that application is absolutely out of council's hands.
Right.
It is with the EPA and a panel of experts that the government is going to appoint for those projects. So it doesn't come back to council in any way, shape or form. That project is out in the process.
So then if I look at para 22, which talks about the finalised list of projects is relevant to Upper Hutt as included the Southern Growth Area, but does not include the following provisions, which the Upper Hutt City Council submission thought was included in Schedule 2. So I'm assuming that Schedule 1 is A+ and Schedule 2 is 2B projects. So what does that mean for us in para 22? That we're not there or that we are there. Because, you know, we're included in Schedule 2, if that's how I read it.
Through you, Chair, my understanding is there was 2A projects and 2B projects. The
Yeah.
2A projects were the ones that would be listed in the Act and therefore ones that I would consider. The 2B projects would be ones that people could apply for later if they hadn't made it into that first list, and it'd go through the process. My understanding of where it sits at the moment is there's been a recommendation that there's only one schedule.
Right.
And so the submission that we made in respect of putting infrastructure into the schedule is no longer, we didn't achieve our goal. And also in terms of having a say, the panel will invite submissions, and also it's down to the panel to determine who it invites to submit. If you recall, in our submission, we said that 10 working days to respond was not sufficient. The recommendation now is to do that for 20 days. I don't know if it means working days or days, but obviously we'll wait to see what the final bill looks like when it's enacted.
I have because I saw that in 27 that we've gone for 20 working days, but if I go back to 46 under B, adverse impacts, do we have a qualification of what adverse impact actually means? Because it's in a quote, enabling the expert panel to be able to decline a project if it will have an adverse impact that is sufficiently significant to outweigh the purpose of the bill. So do we need to see the bill before we would get a definition of what an adverse?
Through the chair, yes, we do need to see the final enacted legislation. That is what we've got from the recommendations so far.
All right. I'm now going to resource management, if that's all right, if no one's got any other questions on other things. So
is that 20?
Yeah, 31. So yeah, page 46. So under the resource management bill 1, freshwater and other matters, I have a couple of questions on that one. Okay, so if I look at 31C, repealing the permitted and restricted discretionary intensification winter grazing regulations, replacing with new regulations relating to critical. So this is where we actually have to let our rural people know that this is being repealed and this is what they need to do. Is that up to us, or is that who communicates?
Through the chair, at this time, we haven't got a plan to communicate these. Generally, they are less restrictive.
Okay.
That is the nature of these changes. They are less restrictive on landowners than the previous provisions.
And then if I go to E, knowing that we've got a working group around significant natural areas and, you know, Indigenous biodiversity, and I see that they've increased the time before we have to land on that. Knowing that we've got that working party there, will we be communicating this? Because, you know, the assumption is that people read stuff, but we know actually they don't. I just think it would be good if we actually let particularly that group, that reference group know. Yeah.
Through the chair, we will contact them.
Okay.
You can't help wondering if, you know, increasing the timeline, by the time it actually gets there, people will have moved on. The reference group will be different people. We could be right back to square one.
Through the chair, yes, that is possible. It's a possible outcome.
Okay, I'm happy to take the other 2 questions offline. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and yes, Councillor Griffiths?
Oh, second it.
No, I'm going to go with Councillor Perry. Oh, yeah, you do. The body language, I can see it. All right, all those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. And let's move on to the Chief Executive's report. Does the Chief Executive have anything to add or comment on?
Through the chair, pretty self-explanatory. Certainly in the new year,
particularly finding home. Because many of the issues listed were not cost.
Interesting, okay. Any questions of the chief executive? Oh, yes, councillor Holderness. Oh, move. Very well, councillor Griffiths.
We've had an informal, but can we have a formal update on who's in and who's out, and item paragraph 0.9 on page 52? One on public meeting.
Told us this afternoon.
I know.
Yeah,
On a
well,
public meeting.
through the chair, exactly as is written is the actual position at this point in time. There are 3 councils yet to make formal decisions, and they will be happening within the next day or two.
Just question. If it's going to end up with the metros and then one odd Waireka council, do we really want them in the tent? Because that's a whole lot of logistical nightmares for this entity to have to deal with.
Through you, Chair, the Masterton District Council decision was to put forward options which included the local YT collaboration and for comparative purposes they wanted to put forward the greater regional collaboration. My understanding is that there is discussion going on as to whether or not they will continue down that path. Logic would say, why would you be wanting to pay to invest in an investigation which ultimately you're not going to have any synergy or agreement with? So that is still pending. Although they have a resolution to the effect that they will participate, but it would seem unlikely that that would be their long-term.
Does that mean does that mean they'll pay the bill of phase 2 as well while they're still deciding?
Through you, Chair, I think the implications of your statement are starting to bear fruit.
Can't have a bob each way without paying the debt. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, councillor Ultra.
Thank you, through you, Chair. On 0.7 on the first page, it's talking about the 9 councils in the Wellington region and Whenua as well. I just wondered if we are reduced down to the 4 metro councils that could potentially be just the remaining 4 who stay in. How will that work for affordability? This is something that the community are worried about, is the affordability of basically having a similar system to what we have now, except that the new entity will be able to borrow 500% of revenue on top of what councils already borrow.
Can I just remind us that we had talking points today that we would communicate with the community?
I can ask you the questions I want. This was.
You can, and I'm answering.
And community have asked questions, so this is where.
So we have got some talking points to answer community questions.
Well, I'd like an answer to that question because I think affordability is something that really needs to be thought about when.
Through the chair, if I could, the actual level of costs and affordability will be a function of scale. So the number of councils and the population served will feature in that final outcome. But at this point in time, it's too early to say with any certainty what the impact of this will be. I mean, if you think about the aggregation of just the 4 metropolitan councils, that's in fact the bulk of the population within the region. So from an affordability perspective, whether you brought in the outliers or not is probably not going to materially alter what will be the final equation for those who live in the metropolitan area. If you flip it around, it may have an impact back on those communities that don't become part of that greater number. But we can't be more specific.
Thank you.
Okay, councillor Carson.
I just make a point, I thought the impression was, and the latest information was, there isn't one just big income and expenditure for the council controlled organisation. Each council will have its own income and expenditure and set the particular revenue charges within its particular council area. It's not just one open revenue setting figure. So affordability therefore comes down to each council as well.
That's not true either.
Isn't it? No. Well, that's what we heard about a month ago.
That's, yeah, so you go.
Yeah, through you, Chair, there will most likely be enshrined in the Act, Third Act, some transitional provisions which will see for a period of time costs ring-fenced, but ultimately the aim is to move, equity is going to be part of that. But in the longer term, and particularly anything from 4 years out at this stage, that's the indications, then things will become more and more aggregated. But yes, there will be a transitional period where things will be more defined and ring-fenced.
I have one question.
Well, just for clarification, councillor Carson hasn't received the questions that we are going to talk to the public about, that were handed out to us this afternoon.
So you shared the material, well, it was updated through Stella, so councillors would.
I got this stuff. Well, the question I was going to have was that recently in the paper, there was talk of the Wellington Water wanting 34 million for system upgrades. What's happening about that?
Through you, Chair, you may have seen that number has even been updated as according to the Dominion Post. It's now 37 million. And that is disclosed in a briefing to Greater Wellington 2 days ago. That funding is notionally for improved asset management and financial systems.
Has to be for that figure, it has to be a SAP system.
Through you, Chair, at the moment, my understanding is that they rely on, for asset management, they rely on systems which are owned by their alliance service providers. They don't have any in-house systems themselves. And in terms of their financial system, I believe they're talking about potentially Techno as being their preferred.
So our position is get lost.
Through you, Chair, those discussions are ongoing. It will be on the agenda for the advisory group on the 13th of December. But in the meantime, a number of options have been looked at, and certainly one of the questions that has been raised is, realistically, if you're making that level of investment in systems improvements, you're going to be struggling to spend that sort of money in 1 year. So it's going to be a staged, more than likely a staged implementation, which then runs into, of course, the obvious question. Yes.
Just through you, Chair, I mean, just a reminder for councillors that, you know, this did go to the Wellington Water Committee back in September, and His Worship as a representative there did make position stated there.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know we're pushing on the bounds of relevance here, but just Chief Executive said about a briefing to the Greater Wellington. Will we get a briefing from them on the same matter, or
Through you, Chair, that's not entirely clear. I can investigate and.
Only, I know we opposed it, but they're still gonna come to us with a bill eventually because we're a smaller voice, so if we're gonna be paying either way, then a briefing would be nice.
Yeah, well, through you, Chair, my understanding is that the primary purpose of the briefing was to articulate what Wellington Water as an entity would be looking for in any annual plan adjustments. So yes, I suspect we can anticipate it as a. Thank you.
Your worship.
And councillor, remember, I spoke to you about a letter that Nick Leggett sent to say he wanted to come and brief us, and that would have been what it was, and you and steer from the councillors was, we're not interested, and I went back and did that, yeah.
Thank you. All right, so was that moved by councillor Holderness? Yeah, and seconded by councillor Kay. All right. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And let's move to public excluded. I move that the public be excluded for the following parts of the proceedings in accordance with the reasons noted in our agenda. Second, I'll move, seconded by councillor Holden. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. Thanks. And this is 525.